This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good morning, all. I'd like to convene the special meeting for the Board of Fire Commission meeting here for February 29th, March 29th, 2025. I'd like to introduce our Deputy Chief, Bisson, who will make a presentation, and certainly our visitors who are here today can make any comments you wish during the meeting. So, Dep, please.
Good morning. My name's Deputy Chief Scott Bisson. I'm a fourth-generation firefighter. I've been doing firefighting for about 40 years. I started as a volunteer firefighter in the Shelton Fire Department. I worked for about 32 years in the Fairfield Fire Department, advancing to the rank of Assistant Chief down there. I was the director of the Regional Fire School down in Fairfield for a number of years, and I joined the North Haven Fire Department in 2022 thanks to this commission, and I've been enjoying that part ever since. Commissioners asked me to talk briefly about some fire safety in the homes, share some points about that. So I have 3 very short videos. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions, but kind of describes how quickly fire moves in the homes right now and some of the modern hazards that we see. So we'll go right into the video here.
Imagine a fire starts on your living room sofa. You're in your bedroom with the door closed. Your normal exit route from your home is through the living room. But what if that is blocked by the time you're ready to take action? In just 3 minutes or less, from the time the fire starts, not from the time you realize there is a fire, your living room could be more than 1,000 degrees and filled with deadly levels of toxic gas from the smoke. What do you do? What is your escape plan? Are there other people or pets in the house you need to think about? Do they know what to do? Every second, the toxic smoke and fire are growing. We now have 10 years of data that show the number of home fire deaths is going up, but nobody's talking about it, and more importantly, not enough people are planning ahead by creating and practicing their escape plans. At FSRI, we've been working with the fire service for more than a decade, conducting fire dynamics research to help them fight fires more effectively. We're taking that data and combining it with custom 3D modeling and real-world footage from our full-scale fire experiments. The result is a brand new way for you to see how a fire actually grows and spreads in a home, the impacts of toxic smoke, and the ways you need to plan to make a safe escape. No matter the type of home you live in, this is information everyone needs to use and act upon now. The fire service responds to a fire every 23 seconds in the US. Fire moves fast. Plan ahead to save lives.
Everybody's heard of UL. We know they are an independent third-party lister that looks at different things that we buy in the stores. We're all taught to buy things that are listed by Underwriters Laboratories or somebody else to make sure that they're safe for us to use in the home. They have an entire science division that's gotten into the fire safety aspect of it. I've done training both with Steve and the other gentleman that you're going to see, Dan, in a few minutes, going over and actually applying science to it. For many years, people just said, fire's bad, fire burns hot. But there was nothing that really backed any of that up. And your only experience to any of that is if you had a fire in your home or you had a family member that had a fire. So what they're doing is they're applying science to it, using things like thermal imaging cameras. They're building whole houses inside a test facility, burning them and measuring how quickly the fire spreads out there. We're going to see another quick video that's going to show the differences between grandma's furniture and what you might go to buy today at any kind of furniture store. The synthetic materials and how it's making it more dangerous in there. The key takeaway from how fast fire moves in your home: closing your doors when you sleep at night, close your bedroom door. Just having a door closed, even though they talk about a fire room being 1,000 degrees, a closed door will buy you time in a bedroom until you can get out. Whether it's opening a window, yelling out for help, using your cell phone to call 911 and say where you are so the fire department can put a ladder up to get you out of the building, things like that. The other thing is smoke detectors. So we just changed our clocks ahead. I'm sure everybody changed their batteries in their smoke detectors, make sure they're always working. In those situations, a smoke detector can alert you within 1 to 2 minutes of enough smoke being generated to get out of the house. So time really matters. There's no audio in this next slide, but I'll just describe it for you a little bit. On the left-hand side is a living room built with older legacy furniture, things that grandma might have, things that might have been in your house for a long time, organic materials, cotton, wool, sometimes crumpled up newspaper depending on where it came from, wood, things like that. On the right-hand side, it's going to be newer furniture purchased in the last 10 to 15 years, synthetic urethanes, foams, anything that can be molded, custom made, even different covering materials. They set 2 different fires up in here in the same spot, in the same thing. The same amount of weight on each one, with a blanket on it in front of a window. These rooms just have a wide opening in the front, so they can film it. It's not covered in glass, enough oxygen can come in, and you're gonna see how things go. When the fire first starts, the fire in the natural material starts to go a little quicker, but you're going to quickly see the differences. Look at the color of the smoke that's coming up here, and now all of a sudden how quickly it's going. The color of smoke indicates the types of chemicals that are in the smoke. Most smoke from a fire is extremely toxic, especially from synthetic materials. As this fire grows, the smoke goes upwards to the ceiling, goes out laterally, and starts to bank down in the room. Again, remember, this is completely open. So if this is an open floor plan going to a hallway, all this is going into the hallway and spreading throughout your house. The couch is completely involved, the chair next to it, it's going up. We're going to get to a phenomenon called flashover at 4 minutes and 50 seconds. See the carpeting? The heat is coming down from the ceiling, preheating all the combustible materials in that room and causing it to give off gases that are not ignited yet until they reach their ignition temperature, and then it will actually ignite. The phenomenon of flashover is when everything in a room spontaneously combusts from all the preheating that's going on. A firefighter in all of our turnout gear with masks and helmets on can exist for about 3 to 5 seconds and will probably be hurt if we are caught in a flashover. So we do a lot of training to prepare to recognize that in a building. We use thermal imaging cameras, and we will actually try not to be in that type of situation. That's also why time really matters, because flashover can occur over and over again from each room in a building. So closing doors, isolating where the fire is, keeping people far enough away from stuff like that is very important for us. The last video I just want to show you quickly is about lithium-ion batteries. So I do a lot of talks and presentations about fire safety, and I try to take the questions that people always come up. And right now, you can't watch a news channel without seeing something about lithium-ion fires. A lot of them coming out of the New York City area because they have so many people living so tightly together. But then there's also all those little shops that you can buy everything. This is UL Fire Safety. The gentleman's name is Dan. He's a scientist there. They took lithium-ion batteries and set up some demonstrations on how it'll actually react in a fire and why it's so dangerous right now.
Today we're in the fire lab. We're going to be testing lithium-ion batteries. We're going to intentionally overheat them where they will catch fire and or explode. When you look around the home environment, you'll see that there's a range of battery-powered devices, something like a toothbrush or a shaver, lawn equipment, power tools, all the way up to a battery-powered vehicle. A personal shaver such as this would be powered by a single cell. Keep in mind that the amount of energy stored even in this single cell can cause fire and sparks and potentially even explode if mishandled or overcharged. If you have a larger battery pack that has dozens of cells or hundreds of cells, That can burn for a more extended period of time. We call it thermal runaway. It overpressures the cell and causes flammable gases to vent out of the cell, or it could even cause the cell to explode. To help people understand what to do and how to handle batteries safely, FSRI has developed the Take Charge campaign. The key things for people to take away from this are buy certified products, make sure that they follow the manufacturer's guidance in the charging, use, and recycling of those products. We need people to keep in mind that batteries are in products and devices they use every day, and that appropriate handling and charging of those devices will prevent fires and keep them fire safe.
One of the big challenges with lithium ions is that lithium as a metal is an extremely reactive metal, and that's why it makes really good batteries, because it's reactive, it creates power that way. But lithium, once it starts to run away in this thermal runaway that they demonstrate in here, there's no stopping that. And the big challenge comes like a small device like this, which might have 1 or 2 lithium cells in it. The problem, it can create a fire, it can start a fire, but it's relatively isolated. The larger the device, the more battery cells are in it. So if you ever looked inside one of these things, all those cells they showed, that wasn't something made up. That was taking out of different batteries. Each cell is about 1 volt. If you want a 40-volt battery, you put about 40 of those cells in there, tightly packed side by side. If only one of those batteries goes bad, it will heat and extend to the other ones immediately surrounding it. It's just like that shampoo commercial, and so on and so on and so on. It will just keep running away until all the batteries are consumed. The problem is it goes so quickly, it catches everything on fire around it. So you're seeing it whether it's the e-mobility bikes, power tools, anything in a home where it's stored, it can create significant fires. And a lot of people have died from stuff like that. So the ways to prevent that, when you're buying stuff from your favorite online service, or if you're going to the store, make sure it's third-party tested, UL, Factory Mutual, anybody that lists it. Take care of it. If you have a battery drawer at home, keep the batteries in their packaging. Don't just take all the batteries and throw them in the drawer so you can grab it some other time, because batteries can short out. It can happen with a 9-volt battery in your pocket, shorting on your keys. It can be anything. The other thing that we see common is people with laptop computers. They want to surf the internet while they're watching in bed. You hear that fan starting up. That's cooling the computer down. If that heat builds up in there, we've had a number of fires start in beds where a computer was just left plugged in charging, and it heated up and the battery either ran away or it caught the blankets on fire. So leave it on a table. They make lap desks that are solid on the bottom that allow the fan to run and cool everything down. But I'm going to move on from here. I'm going to be here all day. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on fire safety towards the end of the program. Commissioners?
Thank you, Deb. We really appreciate it. So this morning, what we would like to certainly look to accomplish is to present to the public a variety of different things that are occurring in our fire department. What the status of the fire department is, the call response times, the presentation of our budget that was presented to our Board of Finance, and some of what we've all been listening to as far as what the proposed budget will be, or what will be discussed at our April 7th town meeting as to what is going to be presented from the town side and certainly by the Board of Education. Our chief had made a presentation in November to the Board of Finance requesting the needs of the department, articulating very clearly based on what our call volume is, what our downward slope is as far as our volunteers are concerned, and the level amount of full-time firefighters that we've had. He clearly indicated that this fire station, as well as the fire station on Ridge Road, have apparatus in them, but certainly there are no firefighters there. Those are volunteer stations. And with the decline of volunteers, it has become very, very difficult for us to respond to all of the calls that have come through to 911. So part of what we're going to be speaking about today are all of those aspects of the fire department. Jen Carwell will begin with a couple of our videos, our tapes that are up there, please.
Yeah. So this is just a quote of what North Haven residents often, say as they drive by the firehouse. You see trucks inside, and you think there are people, there are firefighters in there able to respond, and that's not the case necessarily. So we're going to kind of go through. This slide just shows the trends in terms of personnel. Back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, we had a very high level of volunteers, approximately around 105. Those numbers have been declining since about 2007, and it's been, as you can see, a fairly steady decline. In terms of the career staff, we've had some small increases in staffing, but they certainly don't keep it. The adding to the career staff has not kept up with the significant decline in volunteers. And in the last 3 years, we haven't added a single firefighter to the staff. It's been requested, but we haven't gotten it.
So, 1 second here. So that particular graph, shows dramatically the decline of the volunteers. Right now, we have approximately 15 volunteers. And as Jen indicated, at one time we had 105 volunteers, many of whom were sitting in this very station waiting for an alarm to ring so that they would be able to respond and to supplement the full-time firefighters that we had. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and it's not their fault. When you look at the economy, when you look at the fact that folks are working longer, working part-time jobs, they just don't have the time to donate to their municipality as they did in the past. The folks that have donated throughout the years have saved this town millions of dollars in hours in providing support for the residents of this town, as the current volunteers do, and we thank them for that. They truly have done a tremendous job for us. However, as we continue to grow as a municipality and economic development continues to develop, the expectation is that our fire department should grow in proportion in order to answer the call. So that level line, the blue line on the bottom representing our full-time firefighters, with a small increase over the last maybe 3 years, is what we've experienced. And think about it, 2.5 years ago, we lost 2 firefighters in line of duty deaths. We have not brought on board additional firefighters since then, and we have since closed the Ridge Road Volunteer Fire Station because we do not have volunteers to respond out of that station. Next slide.
All right, so this, the next section is just talking a little bit about recruitment and retention of the volunteers. There was an open house here about 2-3 weeks ago, and you can see there's an effort to have pamphlets and things to try to bring in the volunteers into North Haven. And so when you look at our rising call volume versus the number of firefighters that we have, our call volume has gone up significantly. And again, as you see on the other side, the volume of volunteers has declined as the career staff has stayed level.
Now, we have made every attempt to recruit volunteers, and most recently, there was an initiative to provide either a stipend or a tax abatement or whatever it might be in order to support those volunteers who are donating their time to our town. There are a number of young people that do not have taxable properties, and it was kind of unfair. You know, some folks that own a house or a car would be able to take some kind of a tax abatement, whereas a young person that was living with mom or dad did not have those taxable items, so they volunteered with no compensation at all. So that has been changed. So most recently, there's been the passing of a regulation that will allow all volunteers to receive some form of a stipend, whether they have taxable property or not. And again, as Jen indicated, we're making every effort to try and bring volunteers on board, but this is a national issue. This is not only a North Haven issue. There have been fire departments, and Wallingford in particular has had TV, advertisement, radio, newspaper. There's a wide range of media solicitation trying to recruit volunteers, but as I indicated before, because of the economy, unfortunately, folks are not able to donate their time, not only to the fire department, but for many other nonprofit organizations that are looking for volunteers. So it's been a significant challenge for us.
Okay, so this is this slide is just showing where we are with volunteers currently. As the chairman was saying, in 2022, the Montauk Firehouse volunteers closed. Currently at West Ridge, we have 10 volunteers with 2 probationary members, and at Northeast we have 5 volunteers with 2 probationary. And again, the data just shows right now we have 19 on the roster, 15 are qualified, and that is in comparison to 105 that volunteers that we used to rely on. So that, you know, where our department was very heavily supported by the volunteers, that has become more and more difficult with the numbers that have declined. And if you think about the demands on a volunteer firefighter, it's different than going to volunteer at another, like a soup kitchen. You have to be well trained because you're going into fire. So that means that they have to do ongoing training with the department. You know, the calls can be at any time, night or day. So you know, it is a big demand as a volunteer, you know, task that people take on. There is the Explorer program, which is working with high schoolers and trying to bring some interest into the fire department at an early age. And the volunteer recruitment efforts continue in North Haven to try to continue to increase our volunteer ranks.
You know, Jen speaks about the education of volunteers. You just can't put on a firefighter uniform and a turnout coat and a hat and get on a truck and go and fight a fire. They have to study, they have to be trained, they have to pass firefighters 1 and 2 depth. Is it 1 and 2 or just 1?
Just 1 is the minimum.
And then they come under the supervision of a senior firefighter or an officer to make sure that they're safe. They're required to participate in weekly training drills, and they have to fulfill an obligation of responding to a certain percentile of calls. So in order to really be skilled in the fire department rules and regulations and the fire scene, they need to practice and they need to put that time in. So it's really a time draw from their families and from their work in some instances where back in the day folks used to leave work to respond to a fire or an emergency, whereas today many employers are unwilling to allow their personnel to leave their place of employment during the day.
Okay, so this slide is really looking at the current career staff and the minimum amount in duty. From 1974 to 2009, we had 7 firefighters minimum, which gave 3 units and 1 station. 2009, there were 4 firefighters added in order to have a paramedic program, but there was still a 7 firefighter minimum. From 2012 to 2016, the minimum on duty increased to 8. It was which gave us 3 units and at 1 station. Between 2019 and 2025, and this was a slow transition, we started adding to get up to a 10 minimum on each shift, and it started with 1 shift of 10, and then it went to 2 shifts of 10, then 3 shifts of 10, and then finally 4 shifts of 10 to get to that having 4 units and 2 stations. And adding that career firefighter at having an engine that's staffed at Montewies helped to reduce the response time to some of the calls that were in that area.
So when you look at what we have on duty at any one given time, as Jen indicated, we have 2 shifts of 10 and 2 shifts of 11 firefighters. We have 2 stations that have full-time firefighters, Broadway and Montewies. So again, as Jen indicated, the Montewies station is in a geographical area where they go as far out as to the East Haven border, and is very close to the Interstate 91, where a majority of calls take place on the highway. So when you think about it, when you have 4 apparatus on duty on any one given shift, and if there's an accident on 91, 3 of those apparatus are on 91, that leaves 1 apparatus in town to respond to all 911 calls.
Okay. Currently, given where we are with the volunteer, the 2 volunteer houses are closed during the day. They were not able to respond to calls. So between 7 and 3 at Northeast, the volunteers are closed, and in terms of West Ridge, that's from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And think about why that is. They're at work, they're out of town, they can't respond. And if any persons are in town and are able to respond, you need at least 2 volunteers in order to get an apparatus out. And one of those 2 has to be a driver. So they have to be trained to drive a $750,000 apparatus. All right? Or, the ladder truck certainly is over at fire headquarters, which is well over $1 million. So fire equipment is hugely expensive and takes about 3 to 4 years from the time that you order until the time that it gets delivered, if you're lucky.
Okay. This slide is just sort of a comparison of how many firefighters we can get on scene prior to 2006 compared to where we are today. As you can see, when we had the number of volunteers that were significantly higher, you could have up to 43 plus firefighters on scene between the career and the volunteer apparatus that could get to a scene. And then in between 2007 and to where we are today, if we get on scene within 10 minutes, and we'll talk a little bit more about response time as we move forward, the max number that of firefighters we're gonna get on scene is 10 during the day. And at night, if the volunteers are able to respond, then that will increase, but to a possible 10 or 15. But okay, so the next set of slides are going to just look at the state of the fire department and our ability to respond to 911 and what really has changed over the last couple of years. Currently, volunteers are not available to respond during weekdays. We touched on that. And in this case, that's expanding sometimes to evening, nights, and weekends, as the chairman was just saying. If two volunteers are not available, you can't get the apparatus out. So, and you don't have a driver, you're not going to be able to get the apparatus out. You're not going to be able to respond to a call. So basically, in terms of capacity of the fire department, it cuts the fire department by 50%. You have fewer fire units available to respond. The other thing has changed is we have an increase of, our call volume has increased quite a bit. So we're seeing 46% of incidents with overlapping calls coming in. In 2024, we started tracking, not all year, but towards the end of the year, we started tracking the number of calls where there was no fire unit available to respond. And that occurred 64 times in last year, in the time that we started actually tracking that. And you can also see that graph that gives you the number of concurrent calls. There is anywhere from 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 11 that was tracked last year, where there were 11 calls at one time. So, and I'm going to let the deputy chief go through the example, if you would, about the.
Sure. Sure. So a concurrent call means somebody calls 911, a fire unit's dispatched to that emergency, then somebody else from a different location calls 911 requesting services, and another fire unit is sent there. So the chief had it all broken down as far as our records management system, how often it occurred in 2024. As far as how it happens, when we're talking during the daytime, when there's only 4 staffed units in service, it's very quickly accomplished. So if a call comes in on Interstate 91 for a vehicle accident with suspected injuries, we have to send 3 units up to the highway. An engine company in case something's on fire, personnel to size it up and control leaks, gasoline, prevent ignition. A rescue company up there with paramedics on board to provide medical care and assistance to the hospital, and then another unit, it's called a blocking unit, to prevent that prevent the people on the scene working who are paying attention to a victim from having a car drive through their scene and hit them. I believe it was about 6 years ago. North Haven fire truck was struck on I-91. It was damaged so badly, it was out of service for over 3 years until parts could be manufactured, reapplied to it, and the truck came back to us in 2023. So it's something that happens all over the place. We've had police troopers, police cars, DOT workers, fire trucks. It's happening all over. You don't have to go very far to see something like that. So that's not an over-response to the highways to keep everybody safe. In fact, it's so dangerous out there, very often the state police will ask us to remain on scene even while they're investigating to protect the scene until they can get DOT blocking trucks up there. So that's a real challenge for us, and it takes away local resources on state highways. Another call comes in. Normally, if it was anything from a heart attack, cardiac arrest, where we would send 2 units there to get 5 firefighters there, in addition to the ambulance, to start doing CPR, remove somebody from the basement, from the 3rd floor of a building, onto the stretcher, and continue to do CPR to the hospital, we normally send 2 people. With 3 on the highway already, just on the second call, we've sent 1 unit, and we're short a unit on that. And then follow that, whatever the next incident is. It could be a medical emergency, it could be an odor of smoke in a building, it could be like yesterday in town where we had a microwave fire in a condominium. You don't have anybody available for that. So with only 4 units on duty during the daytime, you lack the capacity to respond to the number of incidents that are constantly coming in.
And one of the things that I think is unique about North Haven is the amount of highway that we have in, not only do we have 91, in which we have 4 exits, but then you also have the Merritt, so or Route 15. So we have more than just one highway that they have to respond to.
You have the Route 10 connector as well that we're responsible for, and there's a lot of action that goes on the Route 10 connector. It's kind of interesting when you think about 3 apparatus on the highway, 1 left in town, multiple calls come in, we have no one to send. certainly a police officer will respond, certainly an ambulance will respond. But in most cases, when persons call 911 and are looking for the fire department to be there, they're looking for the fire department. And unfortunately, we just don't have the personnel to be able to respond to that. And I think this is a learning experience for our public, because again, most folks believe that when they dial 911, they will receive a response from the fire department. And unfortunately, that is not the case in, it was what, 64 times during the latter part of last year.
Commissioner, if
Yes.
I could real quick.
Yes, Deb.
Just to add on to the EMS stuff, one of the things that we're also seeing occur in town is this affects other services. Speaking about the ambulance services that provide coverage in town, very often after that first or second call, ambulances are not located in North Haven. They're coming from other communities into North Haven. And very often fire units that are on scene are being advised, your ambulance is coming from New Haven, your ambulance is coming from mid-state, there might not be one available. So it's increasing that time that we have fire units out of service, and a lot, occasionally we have to transport or stand by until another ambulance does arrive on scene.
Right. I mean, we're very fortunate that we have Nelson Ambulance that is domiciled in town and have ambulances assigned to town. But as the deputy indicated, they can be called out of town as well for assistance to Wallingford or Meriden or Hamden or wherever it might be. That would leave us short in the event all of our apparatus are out. So it's really a balancing act for us to try to deliver the quality customer service that I believe our residents expect.
Commissioner, I think you have a question.
I'm
I
sorry.
was wondering, how many months of time was that 64 emergencies? You're saying the end of last year, so was it over 4 months, 5 months?
I believe, I can't remember when he said we started taking that in. I think it was the last 4 months of the year. We're going to be following that very closely this year, because we'll have a whole year of data by the end of the year.
And then how long does it usually take to train a volunteer?
Yep.
So it depends. In North Haven, if somebody's interested in being a volunteer, there's a process to come on. You pass a medical test, a background check. The fire commission votes to accept them after they're interviewed by people. Once they hit that point, they begin a 12-month probationary period. In that 12 months, there's a number of steps to complete before they can pass probation. One of them, and the longest time, is to pass the Firefighter 1 certification program. It runs across the state. We were just trying to run one locally in North Haven. We didn't have enough students to run it and be able to cover the cost for that. But it's something that affects all the volunteer fire departments. Firefighter 1 is about 180 hours. It includes everything from handling 911 calls, basic tools and equipment, respiratory protection, how you're wearing a mask, the PPE you wear, and then fireground tactics. That is the minimum level of training for somebody to be an interior firefighter. An interior firefighter is somebody that can fully wear gear, get on a hose line, and if there's a fire inside a building, they can enter the building. Once they pass that, and a number of other things, understanding our rules and regulations, our standard operating guidelines, our equipment, because every town's equipment is just a little bit different. The fire hydrants in North Haven are a little different than New Haven. The hose and the threads that we have is a little different than other towns. Once we get them up to speed, we'll make them an interior firefighter. That can take anywhere from 6 months to the full 12 months. And then at 12 months, it's expected that they've completed all that and that they've passed their Firefighter 1. We keep them on probation until they do eventually pass Firefighter 1. The longest I've heard, usually from the time you take the class, you have 12 months to complete your testing at the state. Most people try to do it right away. Then the other training that goes on is every Wednesday night, all of our volunteers get together for drill nights, actually in this station. That's why the room is set up this way. And we train with both the Westridge and the Northeast firefighters on all different things, whether it's compliance stuff, basic firefighting, ladders, hoses, hydrants, pumping, all those things. And that's usually 2 to 3 hours a week.
So, because I'm thinking like devil's advocate, people are gonna be like, oh, well, we just gave these volunteers like a stipend, more people will come, we'll have volunteers that will replace like the 4 that you're gonna have, but what you're saying is that it would take a volunteer a year, a brand new volunteer, a year to be ready before even being allowed on scene, correct?
Not on scene, before they would be allowed inside a burning building. Prior to that, once they start riding on trucks, they're kind of like learning on the job, mentoring. They're observing from the outside. If there's brush fires, if there's outdoor fires, we're gonna have them involved with that. They're gonna learn how to repack the truck, use the hose, use the tools. We don't put them in that really dangerous environment inside until they're officers and they've completed training and we have confidence that they're gonna be safe in there. And there's certain OSHA and NFPA regulations that drive that for us. It's not very haphazard, it's very organized.
And I think the other thing for people to keep in mind is you can't, even if you got 4 new volunteers today and it took them a year to be ready, they're still not gonna have the same schedule as a career firefighter. They're not gonna be available.
Oh, trust me, I'm on your
Yeah,
side, but
yeah.
I'm trying to like.
Yep, no,
have that
I know, I
argument
think
against the
I think it's a
devil's
good
advocate.
point that people need to, you know, that it's not necessarily comparable, but I think it's a really good point.
And how much time usually until they're allowed on scene?
Once they pass their background and physical, they can ride as an observer the only limitation is you have to have a fully qualified volunteer that's interior qualified to be there to observe and monitor them. We don't just put 5 people unsupervised on a scene that's never been to an emergency scene before. So usually if there's only 2 certified firefighters on a fire truck going out, there would only be 2 observers allowed to observe on scene.
So
And that's a
what are
safety
the
issue.
observers allowed to touch and not touch, and basically do and not do?
So it changes, it's very dynamic. The longer they're here, the more familiar with the equipment they are, the more they can do. Somebody with 0 experience, doesn't even know what fire gear is, it's gonna take them a couple months before they're even gonna be able to, help with a hose line or get the right tool off the truck and know the name of it. But somebody who came from another department, we've had a couple volunteers from other towns come into town, it's much quicker that way. And we're hoping to shorten that for somebody who comes in certified down to 4 or 6 months, provided we can get the other things done. So if we have a certified person coming in, we need to teach them our equipment, our rules, our people, and then they can start doing that interior firefighting. That's a great question, thank you.
Absolutely, it's a great question, and the other thing you need to think about, when we hire a brand-new full-time firefighter, there's a significant time from the time that they're hired until the time that they're actually at the fire station. They have to go to the fire academy, certainly as the deputy indicated, all of the preliminary work needs to be done, the application, the background check, the health examination, scheduling of the fire academy, which is up in Hartford. They only have classes there, is it once a year, twice a year? So we need to make sure that we are able to schedule them for when the classes begin. If we're in between, they can certainly be at our firehouse, training with the DEP and with our full-time staff until the academy begins classes. But Chief, walk through that process, please.
Yeah, no problem. So we currently have 2 recruit firefighters up at the Connecticut Fire Academy right now going through training. The process to become a career firefighter is once a job offer is made to somebody and they pass the physical, the background, the psychological, then they start the process. I break it into 3 different areas. There's the initial onboarding, where somebody becomes a Town of North Haven employee. We have to go over, the town departments, compliance things, OSHA requirements, basic training, and actually basic medical immunizations like hepatitis B and things like that. Then they're sent to the Connecticut Fire Academy, which is located up at Windsor Locks. That program is a 15-week program. I think it's about 644 hours of training that just about every career firefighter in the state of Connecticut goes through. So they will be there. Our 2 North Haven recruits are out there with people from career departments all over the state right now. And they're learning everything a career firefighter will have to know. Coming out of the Connecticut Fire Academy recruit program, they will be certified Firefighter 2, Hazardous Materials Operations. They will have technical rescue background, elevator emergency background, ropes background as far as rescuing people from confined spaces, from elevated positions, and things like that. So it's quite an extensive program that they come out with. And many union contracts require their firefighters to go to that. So everybody starts at the same place. That's very standard. After 15 weeks, I believe the graduation is mid-May for our 2 recruits. They're gonna come back here, they're gonna spend a couple days learning to be a North Haven firefighter. So our equipment is different than what the Connecticut Fire Academy, and that's no different in any local municipality. Every town has a little bit different. So you become an employee, then you become a certified firefighter, then you become a North Haven firefighter. With it, less than 5 days of returning from the fire academy, they're going to be assigned a fire apparatus as part of the on-duty staffing, and they'll be responding to emergencies, and they're immediately able to go inside buildings. It's expected that they've demonstrated enough competency to do that.
Are they selected from the volunteers?
Sometimes, so if you're a volunteer in town, they have a leg up on getting in, and it's a great opportunity in the town of North Haven that we support our own. We kind of know the people. It's nice to have somebody, if they were doing training for 2 or 3 years with us, we know they're capable, they know our rules. It's seamless to come into it, but that's not the only way.
Do we often hire like recruits instead of like already career firefighters from like, say, other stations or other part of Connecticut that moved towards, like, I don't know, like someone from Hartford that worked at a Hartford station and then wants to move to Southern Connecticut and is looking for a career as a firefighter in Southern Connecticut? We don't often hire people that have already been trained.
So that's called a lateral hire, and, you know, obviously that would be ideal, because then you wouldn't have to send them to firefighter school, academy, but often there are not necessarily applicants who apply as a lateral. So that's been sort of a, there hasn't been that much of an opportunity to hire from another department.
There's a variety of different
Occasionally, but-
reasons why that occurs. Pension versus 401k, compensation. So, if somebody is a firefighter up north, as you're indicating, their compensation might be greater than the compensation here. So there are a variety of different reasons why lateral moves really don't work all that well for us. So we do give preferential treatment to our volunteers, and we have hired many of our full-time firefighters were volunteers. And either they were hired by our department or moved on to other departments. And that was part of the decline of the volunteers. They chose to be volunteers with the intent of being a full-time firefighter somewhere. And North Haven doesn't hire a lot of full-time firefighters. So when an opening occurs in Hamden or East Haven or wherever it might be, they apply. They take the test, and if they're selected, they move on. And the education and the skill and expertise that they learn through the teaching of from our deputy chief here has been beneficial for them to begin their career and livelihood to support their families. So it's kind of an interesting training ground, if you will. Certainly, we would prefer to hire our volunteers if they're ready to make the move. Yeah.
So how do you hire them? Do you have to put in a budget? Does it have to be?
Well, we're gonna kind of get to that. It has to be approved through the budget, and that's sort of where the holding spot has been. But we'll get into what happened with the budget this year. This just kind of looks at this is prior to 2024, but actually I would say it's prior to the 2022. We originally, these are the number of apparatus in service, and the circles are the different firehouses, and the rectangles are the apparatus that were at those houses. So currently prior to 2022, before Montauk closed, there were 9 apparatus to be able to respond if the volunteers were able to respond to every call. Currently, present day, with North, East, and West Ridge during the day being closed, there are 4 apparatus able to respond. And so a rescue has 2 firefighters on it, an engine has 3, and a truck has 2. And then, and again, that engine has 3 on it. So that gives you the where we are today in terms of the number of firefighters that can get on scene.
And when you looked at those 4 circles that represented, as Jen indicated, the 4 fire stations that our forefathers clearly had the foresight to geographically locate. And they located those fire stations to respond in a speedier manner to different parts of the town. So that breakdown allowed us to do so back in the day when we had the volunteers. So with the closing of Ridge Road, and certainly no firefighters here in this building, which is northeast, it really has curtailed us from being able to respond in a timely manner. And when you look at all of the development that has taken place here in the northeastern part of the town, and you look at Quinnipiac University, and Quinnipiac donated $300,000 to help to renovate the upstairs here, for this to ultimately become a full-time fire station one day. So that we would have berthing compartments and showers and a kitchen and so on and so forth upstairs, and a bathroom renovation down here. So we're making preparations for this to occur, but you can't do it unless you have the personnel. And as Jen indicated, that's the crux of the reason why we're here.
Could you tell us the difference between an engine and a truck?
Deb, why don't you give that clear explanation?
Sure. So engine companies carry water and they carry hose. They can extinguish a fire. They have anywhere between 750 gallons of water to 1,000 gallons on board of it. And their primary function, and that's why we have the most of it, is to quickly control, contain, and extinguish a fire. A truck company, on the other hand, carries all the other tools. The ladders, the extrication equipment, the hand tools, the power saws, the fans, all those other things that get there. So one challenge that can happen is if the engines are up on the highway for a vehicle accident and only a truck, a ladder truck, is in service, they don't have water on it beyond fire extinguishers. If they arrive on scene and they have a structure fire, there's very limited actions they can do. They can search, they can force entry. If the fire's small enough, they can extinguish it with a fire extinguisher, but they don't have pumps and hose on that. And then a rescue truck is similar to an ambulance. It's dual use in North Haven. It's firefighting capabilities, it's extrication equipment, and then everything a certified ambulance would have in the state of Connecticut for providing proper medical care at the paramedic level.
Okay. This slide is really to look at the importance of response time. The response time is based on the number of in-service fire units available at the time. And we just talked about the type of unit impacts what unit is going to go on a particular type of call. The number of firefighters are assigned to a unit, and the location of the units or the members when the response begins compared to where the emergency is actually occurring. The type of emergency, and then the delays. If the firefighters are already, or the apparatus is already out a scene, they can't just leave the scene because another call comes in, and you can't really say, well, this call is more important, so I'm going to leave you to go to that call. They have to finish whatever scene, finish with or stabilize whatever is going on the scene. So while you might think your emergency is more important than the one that came in before it, it is the one that comes in before it that is going to be responded to first. And I think the other thing in terms of response time, we're talking a lot about fire because fire is scary, but response time is also important in other type of emergencies. I was saying at the last session that we had, when I was young and I had two kids, I had borrowed my father-in-law's car, and my son was about 18 months old, and I put my daughter, who was a couple of months old, in her car seat, and I was getting ready to get him into his car seat. Well, my father-in-law had the electric locks, which I wasn't used to at the time, and my son locked them in the fire inside the car. And I lived in North Carolina. It was May or June. I immediately went into panic mode because my kids were locked in a car when it was hot out. And I was lucky. I lived in a town where it was already a career fire department. They were there in minutes, and were able to get my kids out of the car. But, you know, you don't always think about what is it outside of fire. I won't have a fire in my house because I'm careful. I think a lot of people think that, not necessarily true, because fires start for all different reasons. But there are other reasons that we rely on the fire department. You get in a car accident on the highway, you're trapped in a car. You want someone to get there quickly. You don't want to be sitting there waiting for there to be a fire unit available to get to you and get you out. So I think we have to start thinking more about, oh, we don't have that many fires, so, you know, it doesn't happen that often. The fire department here is very busy. And as you saw before, the number of calls are increasing. And that does not include the number of calls that come in where just an ambulance responds from Nelson. So what we're tracking in terms of calls is the calls that come in where our fire department needs to respond.
You know, Jen had made mention that we can't leave a scene if there's a severe accident and our paramedics are working on a patient that was involved either in an accident or with a severe sickness or injury. Our paramedic will ride into town, into New Haven, to the hospital with that patient. In some instances, as the deputy indicated, our rescue vehicles are licensed ambulances. So that patient would ride in our rescue vehicle to the hospital. Now, what does that mean? So out of the 4 apparatus that we have on shift, one of them is at the hospital, right? So now we have 3 on shift. And you know how it works. You go to the emergency room. By the time the patient gets into the hallway or a bedroom, a room, or whatever it might be, it could take a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. So our apparatus and our 2 firefighters are out of service. So that's something that happens a good portion of time. And when you look at our town is an aging town. We have a population that has aged, and medical calls are plentiful on an annual basis here in our town. So our rescue has a paramedic and a EMT that go out to assist and rescue folks. So it's critically important for us to make sure, and I certainly think from my standpoint as an older resident, if I had a medical emergency, I would certainly want the paramedic coming to my home to if I was having a heart attack or a major medical issue, versus the ladder truck that might have an EMT on it. So those are the kind of things that are balancing acts. And as Jen said, we can't stack calls. Whoever comes in first, winds up with the paramedic. The next call, you might wind up with the EMT. They're going to do some life-saving services, but the paramedic certainly could do significantly more medical services than the EMT can. So it's a challenge for us as the call volume rises, as our population ages, and our personnel is out serving the public in either protection of their home or their life.
Okay.
As a part of planning, deployment of apparatus and things like that, we had a GIS study done, looking at the locations of the fire stations and response times. Because whether it's a fire emergency, and we saw how quickly fire burns in a home and it can spread, or a medical emergency where somebody's in cardiac arrest, and how you only have minutes to begin CPR and defibrillation, it really makes a difference where they are. So of the 4 fire stations, it's a little challenging to see up here, but on these maps it'll show the green areas is the shortest response times of less than 3 minutes, yellow less than 5, orange less than 8, red greater than 8 minutes. That's the travel time of fire trucks, ambulances, police cars responding from those stations if they're occupied. So this is fire headquarters here. You can see the area immediately around fire headquarters where they can get to, and you can see the red areas that are great minute response times if units are in fire headquarters on Broadway. Yes?
Just because I'm blind and I'm trying to go like this. On that map, where is Hanson Park and Peters Rock? Is it in the yellow or the red?
down in this area down here. But if I go to the next slide, you can see now that we have staff down at the Monowese Fire Station, it's much closer down here to when we have fires down there. That's provided they're in service in station. 46% of the time, there's another call going on somewhere, and maybe if they're tied up at a medical emergency, the units are coming from here.
I thought Hanson Park was heading towards North.
Well, Peters Rock is down there.
Yeah, I was wondering where Hanson Park was on there.
Looking on here.
Up in the, toward Patton Road, right, off of Patton Road. So, be up
Up
there,
here.
yep.
So, and we'll get to that with the Ridge Road and the northeast. So, but quite, from headquarters, a lot of it is geography, because you can't just go across the railroad tracks, you can't go across the river. So sometimes, like if units are coming from here, they have to drive around and go up, or vice versa here or this way. So it's the roads that we have and the access to get to that.
No, I was just, my brain was thinking wildfires, like October was scary.
Yeah, a lot of it. Company 2, you can see down here. So I know some people have mentioned about, well, let's just put additional apparatus down in this station, but you can see how much of this is greater than an 8-minute response time to get to in the northern parts of town if you're doing that. When our volunteer companies are in service, here's what West Ridge can cover. So this area of town, which is kind of isolated by geography, they do a good job of covering that when they're in service. And finally, the northeast section up here, you can see they're here, but in order to get to this part of town, they either have to go into Wallingford on Tully's Road or drive all the way down to Broadway and up. So geography can be a limiting factor on response times.
Okay, mutual aid. So this is often, we get, well, if we don't have enough firefighters, we'll just get mutual aid here. But mutual aid can't really replace staffing in town. You can't use mutual aid for just everyday incidents because we, as a town, decided not to staff our fire departments. You know, the incidents that mutual aid responds to is incidents around when there's fire or imminent danger to life. And the other piece is that when you get mutual aid, you have to give mutual aid. And I think the deputy chief can talk a little bit about how much we have actually responded to mutual aid. And he was telling us about an incident that happened yesterday in Wallingford where we responded.
Yeah, so over the last month, we've done mutual aid out of North Haven. When you have mutual aid partners, it's a give-take relationship. So we have to be willing to provide it in order to get it into town. 3 weeks in a row, we were over at the Hamden Fire Department providing coverage in their fire stations during fires that they had. And then just yesterday morning, we were up in Wallingford where they had a very large structure fire up there where multiple communities came in. North Haven units were actually on scene, working on scene at it, not just covering a fire station. So larger fires like that, 3 family homes with fire on all 3 floors, that's kind of where our mutual aid is used. It's not for, there's another automatic fire alarm in North Haven. Unfortunately, calls like that have to stack up, and then we'll respond to it when we have available apparatus. But that does cause a delay. Take if that fire alarm happens at an occupied school during the school day when it's 10 degrees outside. That can become a challenge because kids have gone outside, nobody's available to respond. They're out in the cold, probably not wearing jackets and stuff. So these are the things that we try to contend with as we're developing the staffing and where to deploy people.
And the other thing in terms of mutual aid is, you know, as you like think about those videos that the deputy chief showed in the beginning, that response time is really important in terms of a fire, many emergencies. And with mutual aid, you're calling departments in from other towns. So they have to be able to get here. So that also creates a delay in response. So it's not necessarily the answer to replacing having the proper staff here in town.
Not only that, but the residents of those particular municipalities are paying taxes to their town. So their expectation is that they have hired their firefighters to deliver services. And if our town or any other town is short-staffed and they're calling upon mutual aid to provide routine services, all right, or, as the deputy indicated, for larger fires or medical emergencies, eventually the town residents are gonna say, well, why don't you hire your own? And, we're paying our taxes for, let's say it's Hamden or Wallingford, why should we be underwriting the cost of another municipality? And again, as Jen indicated, that time lag to have mutual aid respond. Chief, what's the average time frame for mutual aid to respond for a fire?
It depends on the time of where it's coming in. To respond to a fire directly to the scene, as soon as the call's received at the dispatch center, it's the time together. So we saw the maps of in-town responses. You're adding that on top of where the address is out of town. So it'd be up to 15, 20 minutes to get units out of town. Then we relocate in-town units to try to cover from central locations. And if we hire back people to try to cover, it takes time to get that. That can be upwards of an hour at times.
So again, looking at the first video of how quickly a fire doubles or triples, 20 minutes for mutual aid for, let's just say, the apartment house across the street here, because we would need to call mutual aid in the event of a fire in that building, whatever the size of the fire happens to be, because of just the structure itself. It would take our neighbors at least 20 minutes before they were able to arrive, and depending on the shift, we would have between 10 or 11 firefighters, assuming that none of the other apparatus have already been called out in order to fight that fire. Yes?
Of the 67 unanswered calls, were they responded by mutual aid, or was that meaning nobody responded to them at all?
The police department or Nelson ambulance more than likely responded very rapidly to those calls.
Well, it depends. I don't think we have actually that data, because there were 64 times where it came up as no fire unit available. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was, that it was the call was a medical call. So ambulance might not have showed up. I don't think we know necessarily. Obviously, as apparatus free up, they go to respond to a call if it's still waiting for a response. But we don't have a whole lot of data yet on what the calls were, and then really to track down what happened after. We just know that on 64 occasions, there was not a fire unit available to respond to what needed to be responded to. That's something we can probably try to track over the year, but we don't have that data yet. Yep.
But this was very interesting.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Every Saturday?
No. This is
This is a special meeting.
This is
Yeah.
a special meeting.
But you're gonna have.
So before you leave, the whole purpose of this is to ask those of you who are here in our audience to participate in the April 7th town meeting. Is that the next?
Well, let's go back, I just real quick, we want to be clear about what occurred with the budget. The fire chief requested 4 firefighters, which would have cost $506,000. He presented it to the Board of Finance. The request went into the finance department and to the first selectman. But it was not included in the budget that went to the Board of Finance. So the decision was made prior to the Board of Finance ever considering the 4 firefighters to remove it from the budget. And so it was not in the packet that the Board of Finance received in terms of the dollars being in their budget for them to vote on. But the fire department did have a workshop where the chief presented the request to the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance heard the request, and they heard all the rationale behind it. So when they had their meeting, the Board of Finance votes on a budget to send to the hearing on the 7th. The firefighters were not in it. It was not listed as a cut because technically the finance department and the first selectman never put it in the budget, even though it was requested by the department.
Is that against charter?
I don't think there is a particular rule that says exactly how they're allowed to handle that. I don't think it's, I'm not aware of how they make the determination. We thought that anything that comes from the department heads ends up in the budget, but this year, for whatever reason, it was not included in the budget. So, you know, there's in terms of what we're asking the public to do is if you want to make sure that, that there are firefighters able to respond to 911, there are multiple things you can do. You can write to the First Selectman and to the Board of Finance and let them know public safety is important to you. I go to the Board of Finance meetings regularly, and I've been asking for the last several years, and what they keep saying is the public, we haven't heard from the public. We don't think that this is as important to them as other things in the budget. So they need to hear that you think public safety is important and that you want your tax dollars to go to make sure that when you call 911, that you're going to get a response. To me, that is the most basic thing that we should have in our budget before there are other things that we can look at.
How do you get it back on?
It's going to require the public writing to the First Selectman, writing to the Board of Finance, you know, sending a letter to the local paper,
Going to the April 7th.
going to the
public
April
hearing.
7th meeting. And then the other piece, I don't know if you want to, you know, mobilize neighbors. I think the other thing is that we need to start thinking creatively about budgeting in North Haven. Again, this is something that I've asked the Board of Finance to do. But think about in your mind, what are your budget priorities? Are there things that we could be doing? I have given a couple of times the idea of, we have our convenience center where it's free dumping, no matter how much you want to dump, without checking that you're a resident in town. You're supposed to be a resident, but you go on Saturdays to that area, people are dumping couches, soda machines, that weigh a lot. And the local towns around us, you have to weigh in, you dump, and then you get a certain amount for free, but once you've reached a certain weight, then you're gonna start paying. So if I'm a Hampton resident and I have to pay for it in Hampton, it's easy enough to come to North Haven and dump. So I think there are some creative things that we can be looking at with budgeting. And then there's also looking at what are our budget priorities. And so, you know, being able to think outside the box and make suggestions, I think would be very helpful. And
Did the
then,
Board of Ed get an increase?
yeah, they got about 4 million increase in this budget. But on April 7th, we're going to have the public hearing, and I think the more that the Board of Finance and the First Selectman hear that this is important to people, they want their fire department to be funded, the more likely it will be that we will be able to get additional firefighters. It'll be at 7 o'clock at, I believe, the high school?
High school.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to answer your question, you know, how did this happen? The explanation that we received was that this has been standard policy and procedure to review the proposals by department heads, and the selectman and the finance director then would submit to the Board of Finance the requests. This year, we experienced a reevaluation. It's a 5-year reeval, and property values increased. I want to say it's 37%, with the anticipation that there would be a significant increase per household of tax increase. At the same time, the Board of Finance is going to look to lower the mill rate in order to reduce some of that financial burden that the taxpayer is going to experience. Simultaneously, the administration has indicated, in order to, because of the economy and everything that's going on, wanted all departments to remain flat. So whatever your current budget is, add on inflation, collective bargaining expenses, and not have anything beyond that added to the budget so that it would not be a burden for the taxpayer. So, I mean, that's the rationale to keeping everything the way it is today. Timing, because of the reevaluation, has really thrown a monkey wrench into the budget process. But as we indicated before, you know, we lost 2 firefighters 2.5 years ago, and we haven't had any new firefighters coming into our department. So we as commissioners have been listening to our chief and our deputy chief on a monthly basis as to what the needs of the department are, the call volume of the department, the decline of our volunteers, the stagnation of our full-time firefighters, and we have been advocating to add additional personnel to assist the town, especially with the economic development that has taken place, in proportion to that. And that has fallen on deaf ears, not because they don't believe that we need the firefighters. It's just that they don't want the town residents to underwrite the cost and have increases in taxes. As Jen indicated, and I've advocated for, residents need to make a decision. Is it more important for you to dumping your large bulk, and going to have it picked up in front of your house, having your leaves picked up in front of your house, or do you combine those dollars and have it earmarked toward full-time firefighters that would be able to provide better quality fire and medical services to the residents of the town? And as I indicated, we support moms and dads and grandmas and grandpops and babies, and this is what we do. So
I
it's,
think there's a lot of money in the Board of Ed.
it's entirely
They could
up
probably
to the
tap it.
residents as to what they are going to look to encourage the town to underwrite. So that meeting on December 7th gives you an opportunity to voice your opinion.
April
April
7th.
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, what did I say, December? April 7th, I'm
At
sorry.
7, right?
Yeah,
April- I
at
keep on
7.
saying December, I don't know why.
Bye-bye.
Yep, thank you for coming.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, I know they've said that they were keeping everything flat, but there are things that were added to the budget this year.
Correct.
And it just was not for the fire department. So I do think there should be flexibility, and if this is important to the public, they should definitely speak up, so.
Any other questions, folks?
Okay.
Hearing none, thank you very much. We really appreciate you joining us this Saturday morning. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So
So moved. Second.
All in favor? So moved. Thank you very much.
All right.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.